Greetings Business 310 students. Here's another video for you, this one covering some of the basics of LinkedIn. So I imagine that many of you already have LinkedIn profiles, and for others this might be the first time you're working on one. The first thing I'd like to say is that for this class I realize not everyone might want to have a LinkedIn profile beyond this assignment. So if you don't want to have a live LinkedIn profile, feel free to set one up, and after this assignment you can either inactivate it or take it down, or talk with me if you have other ideas about how you'd like to work through that. But I think it is fair to say that for business students, a LinkedIn profile is a huge gateway to networking and being able to apply for jobs if that's something that you're thinking about doing in the future. So in this video, we'll do a real brief overview with a kind of miniature tour of what a LinkedIn profile consists in, and then mostly focusing on strategic ways that you might consider developing a LinkedIn profile to suit the needs that you think you're actually aiming for. I think it's most helpful to start by thinking about LinkedIn as this third tool that complements two that we've already seen in this class. So the resume and cover letter are very common business communication genres that have existed for decades. LinkedIn has really developed as this third one. And so rather than just replicating information that you might already have on the resume, although LinkedIn profiles generally do that, or again, replicating what's on your cover letter, a really skillful way to use this would be to make these three components work in a complementary way so that the LinkedIn profile does something extra for you. So here's a few ideas for how you might be able to do that. First, let's just take a look at what a LinkedIn profile looks like. There's lots of different ways you can use this, and I'll just use my own for an example and share a little bit as we go along. So this is my profile, and I'll say that I'm joining California State University, Channel Islands from graduate school, and the program that I studied in graduate school was not one that really emphasized LinkedIn heavily. So in some ways, my LinkedIn profile is one that is still developing. I'm building my networks. I'm adding to all of these sections. I've got some of the basics, but I imagine some of you might have profiles that are even more developed. The very most basic parts here that you'll see will be profile image, and some of the standard best practices here are to use your actual face, and don't use a full body shot. You want your face to really be visible. It's really common in other social media platforms to get artistic or maybe conceal your face a little bit, but the one biggest turnoff that employers say when they're looking at a LinkedIn profile is if there is no photo or if the photo is not a clear professional headshot. If you'd like help getting one, we actually have different tools to do that, both at a distance, and if you're available to come into campus, we've got a really nice little studio space set up that you can use to take those headshots. For this background photo, you can upload one of your own. There's lots of different ones, and to edit any of these, it's just this little icon in a circle that looks like a pencil. It's pretty easy. If you click it, it will let you manipulate things so that it looks the way that you want or change out the image. Some of this information will be automatically populated as you add information. So for example, the institutions you've worked at or schools that you've been to will show up automatically based on those fields below. This headline right here, though, is one that you'll get to create, and it's pretty important. If you have a professional position, like in my case, I'm an assistant professor of business communication, that's just what I'm going to use. Students will often indicate things like business major specializing in digital marketing, or some other kind of very brief statement to indicate either the skill that you're really specializing in or the field that you're hoping to land your dream job in. There's a few other details that you can experiment with, and if you have questions, let me know and we can work through them. The other areas, though, that I wanted to emphasize here, first of all, and we'll talk about this in detail in a moment, is the About section. This is one that in my case is very short. I've got it down to one descriptive sentence. I would actually encourage you to write a lot more than that. The About section has got a few advantages. The first one being that there's not a real big word limit. I think it will allow you to write several paragraphs if you want. And so the advantage there is it gives you the chance to kind of tell your professional story. You can explain what your background is. You can explain what your goals are, how you got to where you are, anything like that. And that really is different than this little section up here, which is basically a short tagline. So this is something that readers, hiring managers will take a look at. Use it to your advantage. And then what follows below that will be a list of activity. If you're active here, if you like things or post things, they'll show up there. And then the section on experience that really will look very much like a resume. So a timeline, you can build in details and explain things as far as where you've worked and everything like that, where you've gone to school. And then finally, your skills down here are typically ones, if you've got a profile that's been a little bit developed, this would be a place where other people might recommend or endorse you for having a particular skill. And then other little details can show up there as well. So that's the overview of what the profile looks at. It's very customizable and there's a lot that you can do with it. Let's focus though on that one section I was talking about, the About section, and really why it is so powerful. So we won't watch this video here, although I've got it pasted into Canvas for you. It's a really great overview of what the About section is, and then also some writing strategies that you can use if you want to make sure that your profile is getting noticed by employers in your field.
3 simple steps.
So here's a few different approaches you can think about the About section. And I'm just focusing on the About section here because it's really the piece that I think is different from both the resume and the cover letter. This is the section where you get to write your story. This first approach is what we might think of as a mission-based approach. It's where you see yourself headed, where you want to be going, what you value, and what your professional goals are. So I've got some examples here. Can say something like, every brand has stories to tell, stories that will not only engage, inform, surprise, delight, and impact their audience, but that will also deliver on measurable business goals, and I am the conduit between the brand and the consumer. That's an example of someone who's really hyped, really pumped, and is putting themselves out there to, kind of explain how they see themselves now, but also in the future. So if you want to write like this, you can certainly take this approach. It works really well if you know where you want to land. And if you know where you want to land, take a look at the language that people in that field or that profession are using, and maybe consider using some of those keywords in your About section statement. If that approach doesn't feel as natural to you, there's another way that you can do this. It's called the personality approach. In this approach, you're more kind of explaining who you are as a person, and it's kind of like a persona where you can say, this is a little bit about me, my personality traits, things that I like to do. Maybe you illustrate that with a little bit of a story about maybe, something interesting in your childhood that has developed professional interests for you, or something that's happened in school or a school project. Lots of different ways you can get started here. In any case, the personality approach will tend to focus on the soft skills or interpersonal or communication-based skills. And so a sample statement might read something like this. I'm a reliable team player who's been a productive and dependable member of my department for 3 years. When my coworkers need someone to fill in, they know that they can count on me. So in that sample, you're kind of explaining yourself and emphasizing that you are someone who's reliable and someone who works well with other people. If you want to expand that, a way to do it might be to go ahead and explain a little bit of a story about a time, maybe when you needed to fill in for someone, or how they know that they can count on you to fill in when they need it. You can also take this other approach that can sometimes read a little bit like an abbreviated version of your resume. If you maybe had the chance to do some work or been able to win awards or have achievements academically, the accomplishment-based approach might work well for you. And in this one, you're still kind of developing a narrative or storyline. The emphasis here is that you're talking about the successes that you've had, the outcomes, the positive outcomes, and other kinds of happy endings for these stories, the hard things that you've worked on. This can work out really nicely if you're careful, because the other component to think about with an accomplishment-based approach is that if it's not tempered, it can come off as sounding a little bit like boasting or perhaps even arrogant. And so if you write any of these, but especially the accomplishment-based approach, it might be good to have a peer or someone you trust look at it, read it, and give you some candid feedback and let you know what they think. Any of those approaches, though, can work really well. Of course, these aren't little perfect containers, and so you also have the flexibility to take on a blended approach. You can use any of the elements of the 3 different approaches that I've just mentioned, create your own hybrid narrative, and introduce yourself in a way that feels genuine and candid, but also will be effective for the goals that you're seeking. A couple of other details to think about here as you're developing the statement and hopefully revising it, maybe having more than one version to pick from. First of all, who do you think the statement is for? And really, hopefully this is more than just a statement for yourself or about yourself, but you're writing it with an attention tuned to people reading it. And the people reading it, they might be your peers. They might be your future peers if you're in a situation where you're looking for a job. It might be a hiring manager or other kind of recruiter. So think about what kinds of things will they be wanting to read and wanting to hear, and what kinds of things might they not be expecting, either in a positive or negative way. Who might come across this just by happenstance. A lot of people will find that once you have a LinkedIn profile, especially if it's a nicely developed one, you might be getting contacted by employers even if you're not submitting applications because they're really interested in your profile. So think about that as well. And the final piece I'll say, think a little bit just about how you use technology, how you might use a LinkedIn profile. Are you the kind of person who wants to set up a profile and leave it there and have minimal updates and just kind of update it whenever you really have to? Or are you the person who really likes to go in and check on things frequently, make a comment or often make updates? Depending on the approach, you might want to think about how you write your about section. The question would be, is the about section going to be something that's durable, or is it going to be something that's really nice, fresh, and current, but could quickly become dated as things change, and meaning they would need to be updated? Just some things to think about. Since we're all here at CSUCI, I also wanted to take a moment to point out a tool on LinkedIn that I think might be one of the most valuable tools for you, and this is the Alumni tab under the CSUCI page, and I'll show you how to find it. This is what it's going to look like when you get to the CSUCI page for the organization. You should be able to tell that it's the organization because there's a huge number of followers. At the time that I made this video, over 23,000 followers. And I've circled here in red the tab that's going to be really helpful. You can explore the others, but if you select the Alumni tab, it will show you information about people who are using LinkedIn who indicate that they're alumni of CSUCI. So let's take a real quick look. I've got it pulled up here. If you click the Alumni tab, some of the data that it shows that's helpful will be things like where do they work. We noticed that a lot of these places of work, actually CSUCI itself is one of the biggest employers of alumni. Other local companies, including government agencies and not-for-profit groups, information about where alumni live, and you can see they're all spread out in different counties, although we've even got some international as well. There's lots of information here about fields that they're working in, operations, education, health services, business, and so on, as well as the things that they're skilled in, the majors that they followed. You'll notice business administration and management or general business are right here in the top 3 for majors. So you might wonder, why would this be really valuable to me as a student in this class or moving ahead? And it turns out that alumni are often very, very open to talking with current students. So this can be a valuable networking place if you want to come take a look at who's out here, maybe who's a recent business major. You can get a listing You can find out where they're working. If you're interested in their company, you can start there. There's research from LinkedIn that shows that applicants for jobs are more likely to get an interview and get a job offer if they have a LinkedIn connection with at least one person who's already at the company. So if, for example, you know you want to work at Amazon or the trade desk, it might be good to start here building your network, building your connections with alumni from CSUCI, get allies in your side before you really get serious about seeking out that job there. So just to wrap this up a little bit, I'll say this is a pretty powerful tool. I think that's the way to think about both the Alumni tab, but also LinkedIn in general. There's a lot that you can really do with it. As you move forward, I encourage you to keep things updated and also reach out for professional review. I'm happy to give feedback on your profile. Also, the Career Development Office at CSUCI has got some great resources for LinkedIn, and they can help out with this as well. So I hope this is helpful, and I hope that this gets you into the networks you're looking to be in. Thanks.